Everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here, checking out the final week of PTS changes for update 35. A lot of interesting stuff here, so let's jump right into it. I did want to mention some changes to Battlegrounds coming up soon. This week on the PTS, they're testing out a new feature for Battlegrounds where they are going to be restricting BGs to a specific game mode, so domination, deathmatch, etc., that you can only queue to during a specific time frame. That's going to be for like weekend and special events where they plan to grant you 25% bonus AP during the match. And then the group finder is going to change a little bit to highlight which battleground is being featured with different backgrounds and different default queuing options. And there's going to be an announcement to call it out when this new feature is active. So just something to keep in mind if you play Battlegrounds, kind of an interesting change there. Now let's jump down to the combat and abilities section. We talked about last week there were some additional class changes they were looking to make. Most of these look pretty good, so let's go ahead and check these out next. So in general, by popular request, the raid target dummy now has elemental catalyst active to help improve accuracy of results for both stamina and magicka-focused team compositions. Okay, so if you use the target dummy for parses, that's going to make it even more accurate at this point. And now we have some class changes, starting with Dragon Knight and Ardent Flame. The Molten Whip morph, they increase the duration of Seething Fury to 15 seconds, up from 10 seconds to help it be easier to keep up with new duration timers on Fiery Breath and Searing Strike. Okay, so I do like that change. Very good for Dragon Knight. In Nightblade, they did promise a lot of changes specifically for Magicka Nightblade. Under Assassination and the Impale morph, this morph now also increases the execute scaling up to 330% up to 300. That's pretty decent size buff. And then Path of Darkness and specifically Twisting Path. I know this morph was completely gutted with the week 1 changes as far as damage. Well, they actually increased the damage back up by 50%, help it stand out a bit more. So that is a nice change for that specific morph since the focus of it is damage. Now, Surprise Attack did get a change as well. This skill has been changing a lot. Previously, it was a guaranteed critical strike if you were flanking an enemy. Well, now that guaranteed critical strike can only occur once every 4 seconds to prevent it from adding too much sustained burst. Okay, so I think this was particularly concerning in PvP, but they've now capped that at once for every 4 seconds. Now, if you have high crit chance, I'm assuming it can still crit more than once every second, but you have at least a guaranteed critical strike with a cooldown. Now, Concealed Weapon is the Magicka morph of this skill, and this got changed quite a bit as well. This morph now increases your damage done by 7 to 10% for 5 seconds after leaving stealth or invisibility, or when Major Expedition ends. We'll talk about that in a second. This is really interesting. Rather than getting 300 weapon and spell damage for 15 seconds after leaving stealth or invisibility, note the in-combat requirement for this still remains. Okay, now they clarified this a little bit in the developer comments where they said the first iteration of the morph felt lackluster in PvE counters because stealth and invisibility don't really have much of a, use in PvE encounters, at least for like dungeons and trials and that sort of content. So that makes sense. But they say that there's also more unique synergy here with emphasis on mobility, as this morph was always centered on. And here is a simple riddle to describe our favorite new interaction with it. If your path is fraught with darkness, all shall be illuminated. Sorry. So I think what this means is that if you're using Twisting Path or the other morph, both of them give you Major Expedition. Maybe if you use that in combination with Concealed Weapon, then you'll get this damage bonus. So I'm not sure exactly how it works. PTS isn't up yet, so I haven't been able to test this. If you have any theories about this, let me know in the comments. Now, Dark Cloak, the Nightblade heal, did get some changes here as well. I think the heal was not that great. It was nerfed quite a bit in the previous patches. But this morph once again heals for max health rather than missing health, so I think that's a good change. They reduced the base healing by 42%, so this is still a significant nerf as far as the base healing, but then look at this. This morph has a new added functionality where heal over time is increased by 150% when not moving. When not moving. Okay, let's read the developer comment. The reason this morph has been iterated on so many times is due to the difficulty in finding a sweet spot where it feels powerful enough for specific builds, particularly tanks in PvE encounters, without being too dominant in PvP. So again, issues with balancing PvP and PvE in the same skill. Why not just use Battle Spirit? I don't know. By finding a solution that's not as synergistic with some of the class's main advantages in PvP encounters, probably mobility. Yeah, we think the new iteration will finally reach a point where it can settle and see less swings in design. Okay, so they're basically giving it different functionalities based on how you use it. So for tanks, it's going to be pretty nice. 150% bonus healing, assuming that you can't move. Now, that's not always the case. I mean, tanks do need to move. So yeah, that could be an issue in certain fights. But basically, it sounds like they wanted to make it less powerful in PvP overall, especially combined with mobility on the Nightblade. And so this is what they came up with. Definitely an interesting solution. I don't know if it's the best idea. I mean, like I've said in other recent videos, you can certainly use Battle Spirit to just make it heal for less or have a shorter duration or do anything in PvP to make it less powerful while not altering the PvE skill. So we'll just have to see on this one. Now let's jump down to Sorcerer class changes. Quite a lot here too. So Crystal Weapon, they increase the damage of the second hit of this ability to 45% of the original hit's damage, up from 30%. Okay, so I know this was definitely a concern with Crystal Weapon that the second hit was just so low. This puts it in a better spot, definitely 45%. It's going to be a little bit more useful. So yeah, I think that's definitely an improvement while still, bringing the skill down from how powerful it was in update 34. Now, this change I do like a lot. Daedric Prey used to be a very useful, powerful morph for Sorcerer pet builds. It did get nerfed in the past. Well, it got brought back up, and it now increases the bonus to your pet's damage by 45%, up from 20%. I think 45% was like the original value of Daedric Prey a few patches ago, so that's nice. It's going to be a nice buff for Sorcerer pet builds specifically. And then we're going to move on to Templar here. Just a quick change on Radiant Destruction. They increased the base damage and its morphs by approximately 23%. Okay. Warden's got more changes. Let's check out Cliff Racer. Screaming Cliff Racer morph. They increased the bonus weapon and spell damage for hitting off-balance targets to 300, up from 200. Okay. And then Winter's Embrace. Actually, some good changes here, I think. So Arctic Blast, they increased the chances of applying a status effect with this morph to 15%, up from 1% per tick. So that's actually a good chance to apply the status effect. And then Impaling Shards, they did increase the damage here. They did it in an interesting way. So this morph now deals 30% more damage if you cast it with a Destruction Staff equipped. This is to help Magicka-focused Wardens get extra sustained damage. So I kind of like this particular change, how they make it only work with a Destruction Staff. I don't know if they've done anything like that before with a class skill, which is pretty interesting. Now, I don't know why they don't do that just across the board, like just increase the damage of the skill. Why specifically does it have to be a Destruction Staff? I don't quite understand that. But for Magicka-focused Wardens, they typically would use, Destruction Staff, so it's going to be fine for them. Couple other small changes here. Carve did get an increased duration to 32 seconds, up from 30, which proves, if nothing else, that they watch videos by Skinny Cheeks, because I know he's talked about this quite a bit, and this is a good change. Werewolf, they fixed an issue with Howl of Agony. And then Vigor, resolving Vigor. This was really a weird skill change that they made. It did give major resolve, but they changed it sort of back, but not really. So they reverted the healing reductions, first of all, which is good. So it's going to still be a powerful heal. But it now grants minor resolve rather than major resolve to prevent the skill from actively harming class identity and importance to run other sources of this buff. Okay, so I agree with that change. And an extra source of minor resolve is pretty cool. I actually like that. Okay, and then let's touch on itemization and item sets. So They did update several of the arena weapons to make them just work a little bit better. Caustic Arrow was fixed. Cruel Flurry was fixed. Crushing Wall is the main change that I don't know that I agree with this necessarily, but they have their reasoning for it. So the set now increases the damage of your Wall of Elements by 1250, rather than increasing the damage done with your light and heavy attacks against enemies in your Wall of Elements by 1358. Okay, so we can read what they said here. Based on fair feedback during the early iterations of light and heavy attack changes, we decided to remove the more intense skill interaction of this set to be closer in power and requirements to other Maelstrom sets. We slightly reduced the damage bonus to make up for the fact that it now has more readily available cleave damage potential. So, I mean, you have to kind of agree with this. If you understand the Maelstrom Destruction Staff, it was by far the most useful arena weapon because it did affect core gameplay mechanics, right? Light and heavy attacks were buffed quite a bit by this set, which means it's basically meta for all builds. Even for stamina builds, you would need to run a back bar Maelstrom Staff. So it does sort of make sense that they would make this change so it's only going to buff the skill itself rather than, core gameplay mechanics. But it is a nerf regardless of how you look at it. And then we got Merciless Charge, the Maelstrom 2H. They reduced the damage per tick by 32%, but they also increased the duration to 10 seconds. This change was done as the set no longer needs to carry the damage of Stampede to be more competitive. Okay? And then Stinging Slashes fixed an issue, and then Thunderous Volley, that's the Maelstrom Bow, they increased the damage quite a bit there, up to 191. Okay, Mythic Items Oaken Soul, they did fix an issue where the new Empower buff was not working. If you missed it last week, Oaken Soul did get 3 major changes. So it's now going to have Minor Slayer for more damage, Minor Aegis for more protection, and those are PvE only buffs, but also Empower. Empower is only a PvE buff now as well. It increases your heavy attack damage. So Oaken Soul is going to be in a pretty good spot, I think, especially for PvE builds. I think for heavy attack builds, it's going to be your go-to mythic because Empower is going to be very strong for PvE content. I was honestly surprised there's no changes so far to Empower. So those big, spicy resto attack heavies, those are going to be pretty powerful in other heavy attack builds as well if they really did not change anything on Empower. So that's just something to look out for. And then a couple of other set changes. Powerful Assault got its duration increased and its radius increased, which is nice for that set. And then Mantle of Sororia, they reduced the cooldown and increased the weapon and spell damage. And the change to the Force Piece bonus now gives weapon and spell damage rather than max magicka. Now, the final change I want to talk about is something they introduced last week, this idea of reducing health in difficult encounters. That is being tested this week on the PTS. So in dungeons, reduced the health of all bosses in veteran difficulty, and trials reduced the health of all bosses, champions, and bannermen in veteran difficulty. Still no word on arenas. I'm assuming maybe arenas are under the umbrella of trials, but that's something we'll have to check out as well. But overall, this is a huge change. I mean, literally changing every boss in group content, possibly even solo content in the game. That is huge, and they've done that in only 1 week. So it'll be interesting to see how this works out. I mean, combined with all the other changes this patch as well. I'll be getting on the test server as soon as that goes up. Expect to see some more builds from me as early as this week. As long as there's no major bugs and everything, I feel like we're at least in a position where this patch is stable and we can move forward with actually theory crafting some content for you guys. So it should be good. Make sure you subscribe for that. Make sure you like the video if you found this helpful. As always, thanks for watching.